Now, if at any point in your medication administration, the nurse feels like the medication order is unclear or appears to be incorrect, or the patient's condition would not improve, in fact, it could hurt the patient if they took the medication, or the physician didn't have all the relevant information needed before writing the order, or there's a change in the patient's condition. If any of these circumstances are present, the medication is held until that order is clarified. So maybe you read that order and it's like, okay, I don't understand this. Or you go in and you take the patient's apical pulse, and you're supposed to give them digoxin. And instead of being 60 or over, the patient's apical pulse is 52. You know that that's probably going to make the patient's heart rate even slower to take the digoxin, and so you don't want to give it. Maybe the physician, you and the physician were originally told that the patient was not allergic to any medication. And so the physician's written an order for penicillin. And then the patient's mother comes in and says, oh no, don't give penicillin. No, he's allergic. He almost died when he was a child. So this is something that you need to inform the healthcare provider and determine if something else needs to be ordered. Or any kind of change in the patient's condition where you're just not really comfortable giving the medication. You go in to give the patient their, check their blood sugar and take their insulin, and they're drowsy and they're not making sense when they talk, and they're sweaty and cold and clammy and confused. You check the blood sugar and it's 48. You're not going to give that patient any insulin unless you want them to die. So we're holding these medications until we can notify the healthcare provider that something is different and clarify what we need to clarify, or let the healthcare provider know that the patient did not get their medication because of a particular situation that sometimes you'll need to get orders for. Now, whenever we're giving meds as nurses, we always have to think of the 9 rights of medication administration. Part of the implementation or carrying out the intervention part of our care plan or nursing process is to always consider these 9 rights of medication administration. Now, when I went to nursing school, Lord, years and years ago, I always say last century because it sounds really long. It was. We had 7 rights. No, I'm sorry, we had 5 rights. The 5 rights of medication administration. And it was patient, drug, dose, route, and time. Now you have 9 rights, and I'm sure there will be more as time goes on. Now we've got, you need the right patient, give the patient the right drug in the right dosage, give it the correct way, at the correct time, for the right reason. You want to do correct documentation. You want to look at the correct response of the patient. That's part of evaluation. And then we have to remember that the patient always has the right to refuse. Some people will say right expiration date. There might be a few other rights, but in this particular textbook, and what you're going to be responsible for on quizzes and testing in this particular textbook, are 9 rights. So we need to make sure it's the right patient. Elementary, that's where we start. So we have to identify the patients using objective data. So we have to know the patient's name, we have to know their date of birth, we might have to ID them by a particular number. If the patient has a wristband, we need to check the wristband, especially if we're passing meds electronically, where we can scan the patient's wristband, scan the medication, and make sure that the two match on the electronic MAR. Now, those of you who work in nursing facilities and who might have clinicals in nursing facilities you know that a lot of times those patients don't have wristbands. That's their home, and they don't wear a wristband to identify themselves in their home. So it's very, very important that the nurse who's precepting you or your clinical instructor or some other person helps you verify that you've got the right patient. We have had students who have made medication errors because they have not determined that it's the right patient. Always important to remember that patients can be at risk for being misidentified for all these following reasons. So they cannot communicate. So if they are very young, if they are very old, if they're critically ill, if they are confused for any reason, whether that's temporarily confused or permanently confused. Students who do not speak English as their first language might misunderstand you and not be able to identify themselves properly. If they can speak English, if they are lucid, we want to get their name and date of birth every single time we pass meds out. If we have an electronic MAR, we want to scan the wristband and the drug at all times. However a patient is identified, we need to make sure that we are identifying that patient. But the best way is to check the wristband. Now notice that a couple of things here are in red. When you see something in red in your PowerPoint, it is a very good idea to make a mental note of that or to write it down. If I put something in red, I guarantee that you will see it again. So anytime you see something in red in a PowerPoint, just mark it down. That's going to show up again sometime. Just saying. Now, before we administer a med, we are going to verify that drug label 3 times. You can verify it more, but at least 3 times is best practice. You want to verify it before you take the drug from the cart or the shelf that it's on. You want to verify that drug before it's ever prepared. And you want to verify the med before you put the medication back on the shelf or before you give it to the patient. Now, when you take my MedPass clinical, which hopefully you will, hopefully we won't get quarantined again to where we're at home, but when you come Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday and do my MedPass clinical, we will practice this verifying the drug 3 times. You'll verify it once yourself as you remove the drug from the cart. You will verify it with me before you get ready to give it, and then you will verify it again by yourself before you practice administering it to the patient.